This morning, the committee will review the President's proposed budget for the Department of Interior. I'd like to welcome Secretary Holland and Deputy Secretary Boudreau back to the committee, as well as DOI Budget Director Denise Flanagan. Thank you all for being here. The President's fiscal year 2023 budget proposes just over $18 billion for the Department of Interior. That's an increase of $1.9 billion, or almost 11% over the current appropriated level. On a positive note, the budget includes significant funding increases for most DOI bureaus and almost 8% increase in staffing levels, which is a much-needed restoration from the previous cuts. And the budget also includes full implementation of an agency deferred maintenance and LWCF funding from the Great American Outdoors Act. But we are holding this hearing during trying times. Putin's horrific invasion of Ukraine, Russia's weaponization of oil and gas, increasing energy and food prices worldwide, and the growing challenge of competition with China. Given the current global situation, it is essential for the United States to step up to the plate as a superpower of the world that we are, and the world counts on us. That includes the responsible development of our abundant energy and mineral resources. Unfortunately, even as we see Russia wage a war enabled by energy insecurity in Europe, this administration has made its opposition to domestic oil and gas production crystal clear, on and off federal lands and waters. Secretary Holland, when you were before the committee early last year, I told you that I support the administration taking a brief pause to review the oil and gas program before resuming lease sales. In July, while you were here during last year's budget hearing, I made clear that the time for a pause had come and gone. But almost a year and a half into this administration, and as the world begs of North American oil and gas, we still have no new leases. While Interior held one offshore lease sale in the fall because of a court order, those sales were subsequently vacated by another court, and the administration, for some reason, declined to appeal or defend them. Onshore lease sales have finally been scheduled for this June, albeit with only 20% of the nominated land made available, and alongside a royalty rate increase to 18.75%. But again, only because of a court order to comply with the requirements of the law, which really requires quarterly sales. And the President's press secretary quickly clarified that, quote, "The President's policy was to ban additional leasing." I'm sorry to say it has become crystal clear that the pause is in fact a ban. Making good on that ban, a week ago today, the Interior Department announced it would not be holding the 3 remaining offshore lease sales that could be held under the current 5-year program. As you know, Senator Kelly and I wrote to the President urging him to develop and implement the next 5-year program without delay. We pointed out the Gulf of Mexico producers are among the cleanest in the world and would offset foreign imports shipped across oceans. Unfortunately, we have no reason to believe that a new 5-year offshore leasing program will be completed on time this summer, as is required by law, or that if and when it is completed, it will actually provide any lease sales at all. If that's the case, this would be the first time in history that the replacement plan was not published on time. Now, the administration continues to say that there are 9,000 permits sitting unused, and that's why we don't need to do any more leasing onshore or offshore. So let's talk about this magic number of 9,000. First, this is the number of onshore drilling permits, and I repeat, onshore drilling permits. That's a distinction that isn't being made, and an important one when you realize it's also being used as an argument against the offshore leasing. Second, now focusing on onshore, leaseholders pay to apply for this permit months, if not longer in advance, due to the arduous review process, and there might be more you need to do once you finally get the permit before you can drill. Third, while it is true that the number of drilling permits is slightly higher than normal, it is not true that they are sitting unused. Planning, scheduling, a drill rig, finding labor materials, these all take time, which is why the permits are valid for 2 years and can be extended for good cause. And this makes sense. According to the Bureau of Land Management, over 7,000 of those permits were extended past their initial 2-year term. Now that oil prices are high, we're quick to forget that there were unprecedented negative oil prices in April in 2020 and during the COVID pandemic. So it is not surprising that companies asked for permit extensions and the BLM granted them. Now, I'm not naive enough to how business operates. Oil and gas companies can get these leases and hold on to them at such a low rental rate compared to state and private land that it also makes sense to have them on their books for inventory, even if the plan isn't necessary to develop them at all. We make it too easy. That's been the problem. That's what we thought it would be we'd get something back from you all that would show how we could correct that. Let me be clear, and I agree that federal lease terms should be competitive with the state and private markets, and we should not be making our public lands a bargain basement deal. I also believe that we ought to streamline our permitting process so that it's more comparable to state and private land. We're at 12.5%, they're at 16.6%. They're willing to pay the 16.6% because of the time element involved. But if the administration's argument is that industry is to blame for setting on these leases and permits, then why don't they do something about it? Why don't we make the changes? The fact is the Department of Interior already has authority to adjust royalties to be competitive, address venting and flaring, fix bonding rates, and raise rental rates to encourage production. So, for example, if the concern is that too many leases are not being developed in a timely manner, the department could increase the rental rates over time to provide a financial disincentive against holding leases for speculation alone. You don't need legislation and new authority to do this. You have the ability to do it, and we've been looking for your plan. $1.50 an acre for the first 5 years and $2 an acre thereafter, that's a sweetheart deal that doesn't give the needed push to develop. Instead, the BLM scheduled lease sale in June simply raised the royalty to 18.75, which was a penalty on onshore, which is further than I would have gone, and I've said that, and doesn't discourage setting on the lease, but the royalty on its own may disincentive pursuing federal leases at all. Elsewhere, the administration has not been shy about rulemaking that has chilled investment in the oil and gas sector. So I don't understand why they have not made these common sense changes, which we've talked about. So let me throw out one other fact that we haven't heard from the administration. The percentage of onshore leases in production is the highest it has ever been in the past 20 years. Leasing is part of the cycle of development. Announcements that new leasing isn't in line with the president's policy while taking concrete steps to block or severely limit new leasing have a chilling effect. And yes, new lease sales would not immediately increase production, but the administration's short-sighted approach that only focuses on current production puts America's energy security at risk. The fact is, the federal leases onshore and offshore are producing domestic oil and gas, paying royalties, and increasing our energy security in a way that is so far much more cleaner than what Russia put into the market, what Iran puts into the market, and what Venezuela has ever put into the market. My frustration is at an all-time high that we are talking to OPEC, Iran, and Venezuela to increase oil output while we're at the same time blocking increased energy production at home. It makes no sense at all. Just yesterday, the administration began the process of easing sanctions on Venezuela, if you can believe this, easing the basic sanctions that we've kept in Venezuela at bay by allowing Chevron to begin negotiations with the Venezuelan state-owned oil company about future activity. I guarantee you it won't be clean. While I understand that doesn't give the green light yet to go beyond talks, it is a clear step in that direction and an intent of what they want to do. What does it say to producers here in the United States when we consider working with the Venezuelan government, which certainly doesn't share our values, instead of supporting domestic or North American production? Is this really in our best interest? Is this the best we can do? In that, the best interest of the free world is at stake. I believe that we have two critical goals: addressing climate change and energy security. Actions like these don't get us any closer to either of those goals. From a methane emission standpoint, Venezuelan oil is among the dirtiest anywhere in the world. Putin's war in Ukraine must serve a permanent wake-up call to the international community that we cannot rely upon nations like Russia, Iran, Venezuela, or China for U.S. or our allies' energy security. The only way that we'll be able to guarantee our energy security, which will also allow us to develop the technology to meet our climate goals, is to rely on ourselves and our proven partners around the globe. Along the same lines, I look ahead to the energy transition and am concerned about our nation's supply of critical minerals, where the department plays an enormous role through the U.S. Geological Survey and the Bureau of Land Management. Unlike oil and gas, the administration has shown interest in reducing the reliance on China and other countries for key minerals. However, these early steps require follow-through. Earlier this week, Senator Murkowski and myself raised concerns about critical mineral deadlines from the Energy Act that multiple agencies, including Interior, have not met. These reports are a relatively easy part, particularly compared to permitting a new mining operation. While domestic mining is only a partial solution to our critical mineral challenges, make no mistake, we need to increase domestic critical mineral production and processing, or we're going to regret it one day, because Xi Jinping is taking note of what Putin is doing. That's even more important with the administration so focused on electric vehicles, which will exponentially increase our demand for nickel, lithium, cobalt, copper, and graphite. The reality is that if we're serious about both climate and security, at some point in the very near future, new critical mineral mines will need to open on federal land, and we will need to onshore processing, refining, manufacturing, and recycling. Given my experience with the so-called leasing pause and the missed Energy Act deadlines, I must admit that I am skeptical that this administration will ultimately support the development of these types of critical minerals projects in the United States of America. Given my experience with the so-called leasing pause and the missed Energy Act deadlines, I must admit, again, that I'm concerned. I hope for the sake of our country that I'm proven wrong. Now I will recognize Senator Barrasso for his opening statement.
Well, thanks so much, Mr. Chairman, for your very strong and compelling statement about the needs for affordable energy on the day that gas prices continue to hit highs across the country. American consumers are suffering significantly. The administration doesn't seem to care very much about what the impact is on American families who are trying to buy gasoline and at the same time buy groceries and at the same time send kids to school and buy clothing and maybe considering something they'd like to do for the summer. But at the gasoline prices, as a result of the administration's activities and specifically the Department of Interior's activities, it is very challenging for American families, which is no surprise then that under this administration, 3 out of 4 Americans think this country is heading in the wrong direction. So I'm very happy that you're holding this hearing today and very happy for the very strong statement that you've had, Mr. Chairman, much more reflective of the needs of the American people than of the needs and demands of the climate elitists of this country who are running this administration. I do want to thank the Secretary for being here to testify today. The Department of Interior is the steward for 20% of America's lands and much of America's waters. Now, most of this land that the stewards of is in the West. In Wyoming, half of our land is owned by the federal government. This includes Indian reservations, wildlife refuges, national parks, national recreation areas, and the vast Bureau of Land Management holdings. In Wyoming, we're very proud of our national parks and all of our parks. You know, each year we host millions of visitors. They come to enjoy the spectacular views and iconic wildlife of the Grand Tetons and of Yellowstone National Park. This year is a landmark for Wyoming and the Park Service as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone. The department also manages water, fights wildfires, oversees grazing, and it facilitates outdoor recreation. The West is confronting a historic drought. With reservoirs drying up, it concerns me that the Bureau of Reclamation was the only bureau at the Interior Department that was actually cut in the budget request this year. The department needs to prioritize our rural ranching and farming communities. Without water to grow the crops and raise the cattle, these communities would not exist, and the food needs of the American people would be even more dire and more expensive. The department also oversees much of America's energy reserves. No department plays a more critical role in either enabling or undermining, because it's an either-or here, enabling or undermining American energy production. It seems today that this department is undermining American energy production. With inflation at a 40-year high and energy prices skyrocketing, the job as Secretary of Interior is pivotal. During the last year, gas prices have repeatedly hit new records, forcing American families to spend more on filling their tanks. Every day I hear from Wyoming families worried about making ends meet because of skyrocketing energy costs. And I don't know if you saw this morning in prediction this morning, Mr. Chairman, they're talking now $6 a gallon gasoline this summer, later in the summer, all across the United States. There's no place you can go where it's less than $4 a gallon. During this energy crisis, when the department could be opening up abundant American oil and gas reserves, the Department of Interior has done everything possible to shut them down. The President says he wants his administration to encourage more American energy. Instead, your department, Madam Secretary, stalls, postpones, and kills oil and natural gas lease sales. Your department is undermining domestic energy production, not expediting it. The results are apparent. Since President Biden took office, Americans have become much more dependent on foreign sources of energy. Meanwhile, the same administration has spent much of its time begging our adversaries to produce more oil. You said it right, Mr. Chairman. Well before the war in Ukraine, The administration and the president directly was even begging Russia for more oil. They even put it on the White House website. Not just oil, it's natural gas, it's coal. We have plentiful minerals in this country. We need to find ways to increase, not decrease, production of our nation's most abundant natural resources. It wasn't long ago that the shale revolution helped make our nation energy not just independent, but dominant. America was uniquely positioned to help our allies free themselves from the yoke of Russian energy. Sadly, this administration has brought us to a counter-revolution, complete with higher prices and a weaker economy. Not what a president should be proud of, and the American people's polling shows that the American people are very disturbed by what this administration is doing. Now is the time to reverse course. I hope we can begin to identify areas where we can work together to make American energy dominant again. By working to restore American energy dominance, this Department of Interior could play a vital role in reducing the economic distress that has been caused by this administration on millions and millions of Americans. I hope that you and the administration will seize the moment and reverse your destructive course, and it is self-destructive. Members of the committee are also concerned with your department's failure to respect Senate oversight responsibilities. You promised that this wouldn't happen, but it has. It was only 2 weeks ago that we finally received responses to questions for the record from last year's budget hearings. Last year's hearings we received answers to 2 weeks ago. A pattern has become very clear in this administration and this department specifically. After delaying and obstructing and outright ignoring this committee, Mr. Chairman, the responses failed to provide answers to the questions that were posed to you.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.